regime, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue.
Green Winter, in an escalation that could spark all-out war in the Middle East, the United States has dramatically entered Israel's war against Iran.
Yeah, American jets bombed 3 nuclear sites over in the Islamic Republic. One of those sites was the infamous mountain facility at Fordo, a major uranium enrichment center, hundreds of feet underground. And in a speech to the nation, as you heard, President Trump said that all of the sites were, quote, completely and totally obliterated.
We have live team coverage tonight. KTLA's Sarah Welsh is getting a local reaction to the strikes. But first, to Rachel Menitoff now from the KTLA News Center with details of the military action. Rachel.
Karine, Rick, good evening to you both. President Trump said tonight if peace doesn't come quickly, he will go after additional targets in the region, saying most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. He also praised the U.S. military as the only one in the world to be able to do what was done tonight.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
President Trump addressing his decision to strike 3 of Iran's nuclear sites to prevent the country from building a nuclear bomb. He says Iran has repeatedly threatened to destroy Israel and says the U.S. completely obliterated its key nuclear enrichment centers, including the heavily fortified Fordo, a facility located 300 feet below the surface of the ground. The bomb used is tens of thousands of pounds and requires a special jet to deploy the weapon, equipment that only the U.S. possesses. More than a week ago, Israel launched a surprise attack on Iranian sites, and the country retaliated with a series of missile and drone strikes on Israeli infrastructure.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked President Trump and says this is the potential to usher in a new era of prosperity and peace in the Middle East.
America has been truly unsurpassed.
Officials in California and New York say they're monitoring the situation for any potential domestic impacts. Governor Gavin Newsom writes, there's no specific or credible threat we are aware of at this time, but he urges people to stay vigilant and report suspicious activity. Members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are offering mixed reaction. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina congratulated the president and said it was the right call. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries slammed the president's decision, saying the risk of war has now dramatically increased. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez believes the president's actions are clearly grounds for impeachment. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders addressed the operation at a rally in Oklahoma.
But it is so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the U.S. Congress. The president does not have the right.
Kayvon Harris, a professor of sociology at UCLA, says we'll begin to see the effects of this strike tomorrow and in the days to come. It could be in the form of retaliation against 40,000 or so American troops in the region. The conflict could also impact global oil supply, meaning higher prices at the pump for Angelenos.
course, we can remember it from prior times when both parties have attempted to attack another country or attacked successfully with air power. There's usually a brief hurrah in the United States. Probably will happen again. But then reality will sink in, and we might end up being dragged into a conflict that we can't control, that many people did not want, and it doesn't seem many people voted for.
And Iran has confirmed the attacks and says there's no sign of contamination at its nuclear sites. At this hour, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is reportedly in hiding.
This is the post that he put out just a short time ago. We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordo. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That statement from President Trump right there, if you remember, he gave a 2-week deadline for him to consider whether or not he was going to use those bunker-busting bombs on that Iranian nuclear site. And now the president making that decision tonight and following through. Let's go ahead and bring in our Rachel Scott, our White House correspondent, who's been following all of this very closely. Rachel, we know that the president was meeting with his national security team tonight, and it seems like they had big plans and followed through.
This comes after a series of meetings that the president has had with his national security team in the Situation Room, in which the president was really mulling over this decision of whether the United States should get directly in.
The United States bombed these 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including a full payload of bombs dropped on the primary site. That would, Courtney, imply, at least for all practical purposes, that in order to successfully bomb that site, the United States would have used those buster bombs that have yet to be utilized on B-2 bombers.
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of detail at this point. Here's a couple things I would take away from the president's Truth Social. Number one, he said we have completed our very successful. That to me would indicate that this was sort of the bombers went in, or potentially other aircraft, most likely other aircraft as well, went in here, they conducted this bombing run, and they got out. They've cleared Iranian airspace. That's generally the point at which military officials or the White House, I guess, would release any kind of information once they are clear of that potentially dangerous airspace over Iran. What we don't know is exactly what was used here. So if we look at some of the factors that we've seen today, we know that some B-2 bombers, a handful of them took off from Whiteman Air Force Base over Missouri. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. That is enough time for them to get to Iran. They have the ability, Jose, to fly extremely long distances. So we're talking like 3-day missions, refueling in the air, never actually touching ground. Again, we don't have confirmation that was what was used here, but we have been talking all week about how difficult it would be to actually bomb Fordo. The actual facility sits somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 feet below the surface of the earth, and it's underneath reinforced concrete. Now, the U.S. has these bunker busters you mentioned. They're technically called a massive ordnance penetrator, and what they are, these huge, really heavy bombs. They're only about 5,000 or 6,000 pounds of total explosives, but they're about 30,000 pounds in total payload, meaning that the majority of that weight is coming from these really heavy, strong, basically outer casings that have the ability to penetrate deep into the earth about 200 feet down before detonating. Jose, if they really wanted to take out Fordo, it would take a number of these mops or these bunker busters to just continue to pound at that concrete until they're able to fully break through it. Again, we don't know that